Hey channel, Fernando from SkyFi Audio. If you watch the channel, you know that we're all about the vintage stuff. Not just how things sound, but also how they look. So I've been in the hunt for a while for a turntable that looks vintage, but that is readily available. One to perhaps mix with, let's say, an MC240 Macintosh tube amp and a C28 preamp, something that's going to look in place, much like a Lin LP12. If you're not familiar with a Lin LP12, it's usually a walnut baseboard, a walnut cabinet with a metal top and a pretty simple tone arm. But they're not readily available. So when people ask me for a turntable, I struggle to recommend something that's new, that looks cool, that can also perform. So I thought I'd give this a shot. This is a Pro-Ject turntable. Okay, the model is the Classic EVO. I ordered it in walnut. In this video, I'm gonna crack it open, assemble it, and then maybe see how I can get it to the next level. See if I can make this turntable one notch up from what it is today. So it's gonna be about 15-20 minutes. We're gonna see me unpack it. We're gonna bring it over to the turntable test bench. We're gonna mess with the cartridge, the setup. We'll do some test records, look at some output on the scope and see how it does. So hang in there, and if you like this sort of video, please do remember to like and subscribe if we've won your reward. And hang in, we'll jump right in. All right, so typical packaging, expanded foam inserts, the acrylic cover. One platter. Ooh, sub platter. Sitting just below it. And counterweight. All right. Move that out of the way. So this is their carbon fiber tone arm, at least the one that's carbon fiber. I love the look of sort of modern with vintage, so that's part of the appeal to this particular model for me. Okay. So very Lin-esque, aluminum, brushed aluminum top, really high quality finish, love it. Actually, it's probably an aluminum veneer on some sort of board. I'll confirm that later, but I think I see the veneer in the corners here. Push button 33, 45, 78. We'll have to look in the manual and see how you switch between 45 and 78. Maybe it's a color change, maybe it's not. Remove transport screws. I suspect this thing is dampened in some way. So we've got 3 transport screws to come out. Cartridge is pre-installed. Drifter, typical design for the tone arm, and our counterweight. All right, let's continue assembly. See if I can keep that in shot. So the sub platter is pretty simple. It's a disc, machined aluminum disc with the spindle going right through it. And the bearing has a protective cover on it. It's just a nice touch. All right, let's get rid of these 3 screws. Okay, now we've got a little bit of flexibility to it. We'll see later how much this actually contributes. All right, looking at the platter. Pretty nice quality machining on it. This looks to be aluminum as well. Impregnated with some sort of rubber damping material here. It's like a squishy rubber, much like insulation, like a gasket insulation on a window would be, that kind of elasticity. So, suspect we'll have to put the belt in. So, one manual. Polishing cloth, which is a nice touch. This is our grounding wire, or a belt, or both actually. That's what we're looking for. Decent quality interconnects. Some gloves, in case you're cold. The anti-skating weight, we're gonna need that. 45 RPM adapter, we're not gonna need that. Some Allen wrenches, we'll use our own. A protractor. No, this is a scale. Cool. All right. And the keys to the kingdom. All right, I didn't see a lubricant, which means this bearing is probably self-lubricated, and it certainly spins as such. Let's switch angles here. Okay, so I've removed the 3 transport screws, so maybe this tag can now go away. Mission accomplished. And the belt. One belt and 2 thingamajiggies. We'll see where those go. The groove for the belt is pretty obvious. There's only one of them, since it is speed controlled, electronically speed controlled. So that's pretty straightforward. There is a groove on the lower part of this wheel. Maybe it's for a different model or some other purpose. And these 2 belts, oh, it's just one long belt, silly me. So we get to choose, or maybe you do both. Wow, that would be interesting. I guess this is what happens when you don't read the manual before you start assembling things. But it's too late now. All right, what I didn't look at was how to power this thing. So we've got a 15 volt DC input. Oh, nice connectors on the RCAs. Nice touch there with the ground there. 15 volts. Power supply was probably embedded in a piece of foam. I probably overlooked it. Sure enough, here's our power supply. Typical Warwart fare, multi-voltage. Nice that. The other thing is I don't see any feet for this. So this is gonna sit, no? Yes. They're probably also embedded in the foam somewhere. That's a common thing that happens with our shipments as well. We put stuff in the foam and then the clients call concerned that they haven't found something. And I always say, well, look in the foam. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. And sure enough, 1, 2, counterweight. I imagine we're gonna have at least 3 feet. Okay, I'll look for that off camera so I don't bore you guys. Okay, I located all the feet and they were exactly where I suspected, right in the foam packing. So these are pretty cool. They are also machined aluminum. Got a little green substance in there. Maybe some Loctite of some sort, or adhesive. And then there's a rubber isolator between the outer ring and the threaded insert, which is kind of cool, and felt pads. And in this high density board, they've managed to attach rings to accept these. And I see a little bit of a lubricant in there so that they slide in nicely, or at least so that they thread nicely. So nice touch for that. And you kind of need that, because if this was a friction fit, you'd probably stress out the rubber and end up damaging it. So it's pretty important that these sort of screw in and out uniformly and without a ton of pressure. So I suspect they learned that the hard way. Okay, that's number 2. I was thinking about the extra belt, and I think I have a solution for both issues all at once. So remember before there was only one position for 45 and 78, but there were 2 slots on the pulley. So I suspect that you end up choosing which of the 2 high speeds you want, where there's 45 and 78, and then choose your belt accordingly. I will have to confirm that in the manual, but that's my suspicion. Okay, other thing is this top plinth is in fact fully suspended, and it's just gravity that holds it in place. So if you turn this upside down, the platter will lift, or at least the plinth will separate. So you gotta be careful with that. So yeah, I'm thinking that this is probably our 45-33 arrangement here. And then maybe you go with the other belt to this position for the 78. We will find out. Okay, now moving on to, well, let me put the platter on. Nice. And I did see a felt mat. Standard affair, nothing fancy. Okay, now we're on the feet, and you can see the elasticity of the rubber feet quite a bit. So between the elasticity of the plinth and the rubber feet, we've got 2 layers of isolation to the surface. All right, the counterweight follows the same theme. This seems to be machined steel, plastic insert, and again, there's rubber material inside, labeled 183. That's probably has something to do with the weight. And it does has a very coarse thread in it, so that's how you, I imagine that's how you adjust it, by turning that. And there's a little detent on there, which is nice. Okay. So that's it. We'll have to secure this for shipping. It could never go calibrated, which is a bummer. But perhaps we like to calibrate these tables before going out to a client, especially if we mount a high-end cartridge. So we like to be able to secure everything in place. Some turntables have a set screw here that allows you to dial it in and then permanently fix it. This one doesn't, but we've got a way around that. We usually take a very fine piece of red tape and mark the exact position where we want the counterweight, and then we ship a scale with the turntable so the client can do a fine adjustment. Here we have a post for our anti-skate, our lifters, as said before, pretty conventional hinges. All right, I think we're nearing final assembly. Okay, I must confess, I just cheated and looked at the manual. There were a couple of things that were hanging me up. First was where to mount the anti-skate positioning stem. And it's this tiny little hole that's hiding just above there. It's just out of sight, so that was tripping me out. So very, very simple. Insert that in, hand tight, you don't have to do anything crazy. And then you probably can't see the string online on the video, but there are 3 notches on this little, there are 3 notches on this mounting post for the amount of anti-skate, and we'll talk about that later when we adjust. For now, I'm just going to set it to the middle position and hang it from the other part. So that's what you should end up with. There's a little weight hanging right here. Also, not quite sure about 2 other things. One is how I'm gonna reach the wrench into these vertical tracking angle. This is how you adjust the height of the tone arm so that it's parallel with the surface of the record, and they're kind of sunken into the plinth, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to be able to get at least this wrench that they supplied into that. There's two of them that have to be loosened for the height. I do have an Allen wrench with a ball end on it, which will make it a lot easier, but I need some clarity on that. And then where exactly the azimuth adjustment screw is, I see one right over here, tiny little screw right here, and they did supply a wrench that fits there, so I'm gonna guess, actually that doesn't fit there, so I don't know where it is. And the problem is that on the manual they've got this blob of black ink, so you have no idea where this arrow is pointing to, but we do know it's pointing on this side somewhere, so we will find that adjustment later on the test bench. Alright, so pretty simple. Took maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes to assemble, or at least do the rough part of it. So next I'm going to move this over to the test bench and finish the more critical adjustments. Okay, now we're at my most awesome test bench. This is a rig that I built, I think about 3 years ago at this point, that is designed only for calibration of turntables and reel-to-reel machines. So it's just the right amount of equipment I need. I've got a drawer here with all the gadgets and calibration tools. I got a spinny top that lets me get to the back of these things easily. I've got an oscilloscope to read output. I've got a tape recorder test system for when I calibrate reel-to-reels and cassette decks. I got a preamp. I got an Akimichi T100. I got my trusty phosgometer. Oops. Right there. Yeah. Some powered speakers of mediocre quality. The hookups to the back of the preamp so I don't have to just jump around. Whole thing's on wheels. It even has a test record holder at the bottom. This I'm most proud of. So anyway, Vention is the company that allows you to design these things online and build, and they send you a whole bunch of parts, much like an erector set. So very cool stuff. All right, back to the turntable. Nice and light, easy to move around the shop, which I really dig. I am now going to connect power. Sorry about that. That's pretty simple. It's one of these universal things. Okay, it's plugged into the outlet back there, powered on. I push the power button and nothing happens. So, two possibilities. One, well, that has a light. That does nothing. Did they hide a power button somewhere? I don't think so. Okay. All right, we're back in action. So I'm going to plug in power to the 15 volts. Spin this thing around. Let's see if we get spinny motion. Sure enough, little blue LED flashing. Right now I suspect that will go steady at some point. Yeah, sure enough. So that's probably the quartz lock feature. That means we're at correct speed. So it's not a feedback system, so it doesn't know that it's achieved speed. I think it just must be a timer to allow you to give you enough time to let it settle, because if I do stop it, it doesn't start blinking again. And then a long press turns it off. So let's see if I do that and hold it. Oh, cool. It is measuring. And it is locking. Interesting. But once it's locked, it doesn't report back that it's lost speed. Go to 45, it's a single push. And again, to go to 78, we've got to pull the platter off and switch to the other position on the pulley and use the other belt. Okay, next we're going to check the proximate accuracy of the motor. So this is my trusty RPM app, calibrated as I did a few videos back. I've got an offset of 0.997, which is how I dialed this in on an SL1200. That's running real nice. So I'm pretty confident with this thing. Pop it on there, and it is reading 33.16. A bit slow, but it is green, which means it's within a reasonable spec. If I switch over to 45, this blinks. It's going up now. We're at 37, 38. This has already stopped blinking. We're still 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. So I'm not quite sure what the blinking light indicates. This is a bit better, 44.85. So that's within a very small percentage of accuracy. I'm not going to test 78. That's a little boring. And it's really not a viable turntable for 78, especially since it has a fixed head shell. To change this cartridge over to a 78 cartridge every time you want to play 78s makes no sense. So if that's your goal, either make this a dedicated 78 RPM turntable or get yourself a turntable with a removable head shell. So inconclusive results, but we will test this later with a more accurate method. I've got a test record and we can measure frequency on the oscilloscope, so we'll know how far off we are from here. A couple interesting things I read online. First of all, this is a great picture of a cross-section of the turntable, and this shows the feet here, the bearings, the platter, and the chassis itself. And looks like they've used about 6 of these elastomer balls, this green area here, to dampen the top on it. So instead of springs tend to be a little fuzzy and they do bounce around. That's the only thing I don't like about the LP12 is that anytime you disturb it, it takes quite a while to settle down because it is spring-loaded. This is on elastomer balls, so this is a pretty cool design and something I'm looking forward to seeing how it performs. And here's a cross-section of the tone arm. Another thing to put is the tone arm, even though it looks to be carbon fibered, it's really just carbon fiber plated. It looks like it's an aluminum arm tube clad in carbon fiber. Not sure if the intent is on that. It would have been nice if it was a full carbon fiber tube, or at least more impressive, but they must have their reasons for using aluminum and carbon fiber in a sandwich configuration. And you can see the bearing positioning here. But keep in mind this illustration is for the Project Classic, not the EVO, which is what we've got now, so there may be some slight variations. I also read online that the damping material is Ortofon branded. I'm not quite sure if that's still the case on the EVO 2. And it is a 9-inch toner, if I didn't report that earlier. So next I'm going to go ahead and light this up and put some test records through it. Let's talk about the cartridge on here. This came pre-installed with a Sumiko Amethyst moving magnet unit, which is a very nice cartridge. It doesn't come with a box. I pulled this out of inventory just so that I could get the specs for it. Take a look and see what the tracking force is. A couple of things I like about this line from Sumiko is that it has a replaceable stylus. So if this is your first turntable and you might be a little clumsy or unfamiliar in how to use it carefully, there's a good chance you're going to damage the stylus. So rather than throw away the entire cartridge, you can just replace the stylus. So this is a really nice match for this turntable. Now, it doesn't always ship with this. I think Pro-Ject was out of the Moonstone, which is what it typically comes with, so they upgraded us to the Amethyst. And I think also sometimes it ships with an Ortofon cartridge. It does have a protector, which is a critical piece, and of course make sure you save that and don't throw it out. Talking tracking force, so it comes with this plastic dual purpose gizmo, and believe it or not, it's pretty accurate. I looked up what the conversion rate is between grams and MNs. It must be some sort of I'm afraid to admit I don't know what that unit is of measurement. I don't see it, but anyway, it's a 1-to-1, so essentially a 20 MNs is 2 grams of tracking force. So if you set the stylus precisely at the 2 mark, we just about reach balance, right about there. Right there. So it's right on that little point there, and that's what the tracking force is for this cartridge. They're suggesting 1.8 to 2.2 grams. 2.0 is the sweet spot. And then I confirmed it with my trusty, easier to use scale. And sure enough, we're right at 2 grams. So even though it's pretty inexpensive, this is a pretty cool device and much more accurate than gradations on the counterweight. So that's pretty cool. I'm not going to mess with any other setting because this did come pre-calibrated. The other thing I noticed is these wires are a bit tight, but they seem to be making it. I would have loved to seen a bit more slack on them. Other things to look out for, this is a good time to check our lift mechanism, which is dampened and slowed down, which is nice. Here I'm dropping it right there, so it's about a 2.5 second drop. Okay, and the resting spot does not have a locking mechanism for it. Looks like it would, but it doesn't. But it is adjustable for height, which is nice. Let's talk about anti-skate. The easiest way to set anti-skate on most turntables is to match the tracking force. So in this case, we know we've got 2 grams of downforce. So that's illustrating here that we want to be at the second groove. And that's exactly where we put it, right in the middle groove. So we're still there. So we should be all set with tracking force, but we'll see that later with the test record. All right, I pulled out my trusty Hi-Fi News Analog Test LP record. This is my go-to piece for just about every calibration. You can buy this on Amazon, that's the easiest spot. Okay, so the first track on here, I use it to identify left and right channels.
Channel orientation. My voice is recorded on the left-hand channel only.
I won't bore you with that. So left-hand channel, right-hand channel.
Correct.
Then there's a facing test on here.
To come from the space between the speakers.
So this is where you identify whether any of the channels are reversed, out of phase or in phase. It's an important test. I've found colors to be wrong. I've found leads to be wrong. I've found all sorts of stuff on turntables. So I always make sure that I do a phase test before it goes out. And then there's some pink noise over here. Then the next 2 tracks are left channel, right channel, pink noise. Then there's the track with nothing on it, not even grooves, and that kind of gives you an illustration of where the arm is trying to pull. In this case, it's pulling inward, just ever so slightly. And the next 4 tracks is where it gets interesting. These are essentially torture tests. Specifically, bias settings, a 300 hertz tone, both channels at 12 dB, then it goes up to 14, then 16 dB, and then 18 dB, which is essentially like a torture groove. So this is a good indication how well this tone arm combination can track, and also how good the anti-skate is dialed in. Because we will start seeing distortion on one channel earlier than the other from the forces exerted on the stylus by the record. So track number 1 is right here, and you can see on the oscilloscope there's a yellow and a red line superimposed. The red channel is slightly off, very little bit. Can't be more than half a dB. That would be imperceivable, but very good so far. No distortion whatsoever on track 1. Second one settles in pretty nicely. Again, very little visible distortion. That's what a 300 hertz tone sounds like. Go to the next track. This is where most of them start showing some strain, but still pretty good. You can see the amplitude is much larger, but still the curves on these sine waves are very smooth and very composed. Generally, this is where I see the problems. And then track number 4 is where most things fail. Sometimes the arm can't even track track number 4. Let's see what this thing does. So again, we've got an increase in amplitude and still no distortion. Maybe just a tiny pretty good combination of cartridge to torn arm. Alright, I'm flipping the record over. Track 1 is tracking ability again at plus 15 dB. We've already done that. We're going to skip to band 2, which is a cartridge arm resonance test sweep. 25 to 5 hertz. So what
19 hertz.
So what we're looking for here is essentially when this arm starts wiggling. That'll indicate what the resonant frequencies is of this combination of arm and cartridge. Now we're at 15 hertz. It's pretty steady still.
13 hertz. 11 hertz.
You can start to see it wiggle there a little bit, 11 hertz.
9 hertz.
Quite a bit more at 9.
7 hertz.
And then it settles down. So we've left its resonant frequency. So you can say this is about 9 hertz. Now I'm just confirming a few things on here to make sure the cartridge was in fact set up correctly. Obviously it's performing really nicely, but I always like to check to see how good of a job the factory does at this. So I've got my trusty protractor from Dr. Fikert. I've got this needle positioned on the axis of the tone arm. Pivot to spindle measures around 211 millimeters, and I can check where the cartridge is set forward properly. I can tell that by looking at where the needle lands on there. Looks like it was set for bare world. And then I can check the whether it was aligned properly. Again, using this position and once again this position. So it's really nicely dialed in. So kudos to them for that. Okay, now I'm checking the vertical tracking angle. Now you can only use this method with tone arms that are essentially straight tone arms, ones without the taper. A tapered tone arm would measure differently, but I've got just a very simple acrylic block here with some gradations on it. So you can actually set your record, set the cartridge on the record itself with the mat you're going to use and kind of see how leveled it is. And you kind of want it leveled with the surface of the record. Now, mind you, records come in different thicknesses. This is almost spot on. It's one hair off. But if I were to put a high quality, high weight cartridge, record, I bet you would be spot on. So I think they've chosen a really nice neutral point. And I'm super happy about that because that means I don't have to go looking for a wrench to fit those Allen screws. All right, so the only thing I haven't checked yet. Okay, now we're going to check the vertical tracking angle. That is essentially the height of the tone arm and how it relates to position of the stylus on the record. So I've got a very inexpensive gradiated block here. You just set it with the tone arm in place, and you just check for level to make sure that the lines align with the top of the arm. Now you can't do this with a tapered arm, for obvious reasons, so you've got to be mindful. This won't work with every tone arm. And I see it's really close. It's just slightly off, but you have to attribute for the variations in record thickness as well. So a much thicker, higher quality pressing is going to lift the tone arm and also change that little angle slightly. So it looks like it's just a hair off, close enough where I'm not going to touch it, which I'm super happy about because I know I was going to struggle to get a wrench into those two Allen screws. So good news on that. All right, the last thing to check is the vertical tracking angle. That's essentially this orientation of the cartridge. I've got a trusty track on this record for that, but first I've got to find where the set screw is to adjust it. So I'm going to go do a little research. All right, looks like I'm going to have to give up on finding the azimuth. I downloaded the manual online thinking I would have a better picture, and I do have a better image from it. If you look over here, there is a better, you can kind of follow the black line to just about the inside of the arm there, but I've looked on the tone arm and I don't have a screw there. And then I realized that this manual is still the Classic, not the Classic Evo, which is what we've got. So it doesn't look like it's been updated. But they do have a Classic Evo changes document that talks about a few things. And this is worth noting here. And I noticed this from an earlier picture. So the sub platter is aluminum in our machine, and the older one was plastic. So I'm super happy to see that. Looks like they're holding a super tight tolerance on the sub platter, which is pretty critical, 0.001 millimeters. Upgrades to the tone arm bearing. The tone arm rest is also improved. The sub chassis has been reworked and so on, but no mention on how to adjust that. But I think overall we had pretty good channel balance, so I'm not concerned about the azimuth on this tone arm, and the results were stunning. And that's really what's been surprising about this turntable, is how well it performed on the tests. So now we're gonna hook it up and at least listen to a couple of tracks. Let's see how it does. Alright, so that concludes this evaluation. I hope you've enjoyed it. Overall, really nice turntable. It fits the criteria of what I was looking for. Something easy to set up. It's got classic looks, good performance, and a good value. This is, I think, around 2,000 and change for this particular setup. I haven't tried the cover on, but it's going to be pretty simple. The hinges are just regular hinges. They're not anything special, so you're gonna have to, they're not dampened or have a very specific setting point, so pretty basic on that. So overall, real nice, nice surprise. I thought I was gonna make this video about how we take this to the next level and put a better cartridge on it, but I was pleasantly surprised. This amethyst is actually really nice. It's a great match for this tone arm, so kudos for that. I hope you've enjoyed the video. We are dealers for Project, so we will have one of these listed on our website, skyfiaudio.com, if you want it. And if you want to discuss cartridge options, you can always call the shop. I'm happy to talk to you. Thanks for watching, and these videos, I just do them on the go. I don't write a script. I don't do hours of editing. You see the videos that's being done, warts and all. So I don't look at manuals until after I get stuck. You know, I make mistakes along the way. If that's not your cup of tea, then this might not be the right channel for you, but I do have fun making the videos, and I hope you've enjoyed it.